Last week on The Beam, we examined the case of a corps member who dared raise her voice in frustration about the state of things in Nigeria. And instead of dialogue, she was met with threats. It was a conversation about power, control, and the dangers of speaking truth in a country that is growing increasingly allergic to dissent. This week, the stakes have been risen even higher. The president has declared a state of emergency in Rivers State. But beyond the headlines, the bigger question remains: where does governance end and where does suppression begin? Is this truly about protecting the people, or is it another consolidating effort for power alone to play out? From the voice of one citizen to the fate of an entire state, the events of the past weeks paint a troubling picture of control, silence, and crisis. Today we are probing it all. We are discussing the many faces of suppression in Nigeria. And the question remains: who controls the narratives? On this premise, let me welcome you to The Beam, where curiosity stirs conversation, taking us a step further into the future we desire. I'm Sunes Nathaniel, and I want to assure you, dear viewers, that here we don't just report the news. We ask the questions that matter the most, and we bring you the most critical issues. We project the voices that challenge and the insights that inspire. And joining me right now to answer some of those most pertinent questions regarding the issue at hand is Mr. Samson Itodo, the Executive Director of YAGA Africa, a member of the African Union Advisory Group on AI, and a principal partner at the Election Law Center. Mr. Itodo, you're welcome to The Beam.
Thank you very much.
All right, so as stated earlier on, last week, The Beam took a very deep look into the case of the corps member, and that really sparked a firestorm of debate. And here we are again, a nation attempting to ride the wave of another political storm. And the question remains: is there by any chance a way that we can say that what we're experiencing in Nigeria today is not the rule of fear?
Well, thank you very much. So please confirm you can hear me.
Clearly.
Yeah, I think that what we are experiencing in the Nigerian context today, it's really disappointing, because when you think about the notion of democracy, democracy guarantees certain rights and freedom. And principal amongst them is the freedom of expression, and that people have a right to voice their views, about how their society is governed. Because when you limit expression, what you become is an authoritarian state. And the classic point of a young lady who voiced her frustration in exercise of her democratic rights, and the response that followed, clearly tells you that we still have a long way to go in our journey of democratization. What is a democracy if people cannot speak freely without any fear of intimidation, regardless of the commitments that they have? And so that's really, really disappointing. And what we've seen in the last 1 week, is an attempt to weaponize democratic structures to undermine the rule of law and the rights of citizens, including the rights that institutions have vested in them by the Constitution to govern the Nigerian society.
All right. Looking at the Rivers State issue, as we have also brought that in, one is tempted to ask the question: where does governance end? And, where does suppression begin? And what are the many faces of suppression that we are seeing in Nigeria today?
There are many, many faces of suppression in Nigeria. So first, let's begin with the media in terms of censorship and media clampdown. We're seeing, gradual erosion of the freedom of a free press. We've seen harassment and detention of journalists, because the role that journalists play in a democracy is too important to be treated in the manner and the level of impunity that we have seen. We've also seen, whether it's shutdown of media houses, we cannot say the number of journalists that have been arrested, that are currently in detention. Those are the faces, of suppression. We've also seen harassment of citizens who express dissent. Dissent is part of patriotism. When you harass opposition parties, when you harass people who deem to question governments and hold governments to account, that is an expression of suppression, what you might call political suppression. When you see institutions of state being captured and unable to perform their responsibility, whether they are regulatory institution, whether it's the judiciary or the legislature, what you get is state capture. State capture is an expression, of suppression within the democratic space. We've also seen, weaponization of poverty, whether high unemployment rates is one way, to suppress citizens, especially when you limit economic opportunities to certain people because of their geographical extraction or because of the religion that they represent. These are the faces of suppression. When you look on social media, where individuals, Nigerian citizens who have a constitutional right to speak, have a constitutional right to ask questions, when the response from our security agencies is arrest, unlawful detention, even when the courts have granted them bail, what you see is a face of suppression. So we're seeing all those faces of suppression. And it just boils down to the fact that we have people in the reins of power who are creation of the Constitution, who intentionally undermine and assault the Constitution. And a case in point is what happened in Rivers State, that democratic structures were removed by executive proclamation, of a state of emergency. And this really portends, danger for our democratic process.
Yeah, it really does. And that brings me to the next question, which becomes, we have the people, we have the politicians, we have the unseen hands of some of the powerful elites, who some might call now the cabal. And then the question is, who controls the narratives of what Nigeria truly is today? Who can we really say these are the people who are dictating what Nigeria is today? Who can we pin it on?
Well, you have to pin it to the people who have the responsibility to protect the Constitution. The Constitution is clear. The oath of office. Now, you see, when people are sworn into office and they swear to protect the Constitution, a personal diary. It's not a journal. The Constitution is the grand norm, is a sacred document, responsibilities, and the duties that those who are in power owe to the Nigerian people. Because when people vote you into office, they are giving you certain powers to take decisions on our behalf, and you have a duty to be accountable to the people. That is why you have a constitution. So when you're saying, who are those? Those who are duty bearers, the president, our governors, our legislators in the state houses of assemblies and the National Assembly, our security agencies, people who have been appointed by people who have political or executive political powers, our local government chairmen, our councillors. All these people have a repository of political power, and they owe it to the Nigerian people to protect the Constitution because they swear by the Constitution. So if you ask me, those are the people that have a responsibility, including security agencies, because they are also a creation of the state. Their responsibility is to defend citizens, but not to defend those who are in power at the expense of public interest. There's a reason why the overriding public interest is what should govern and regulate, whether it's security operations, security management, or governance. But a case where, because a political elite has access to power and they use that power to intimidate citizens, especially when citizens have asked right accountability questions, it is totally unacceptable and should be rejected by all means.
Indeed, it must be rejected by everybody. By all means, we must reject it. Now, one of those places people continue to, point fingers at is the electoral umpire. The masses continue to point fingers at the electoral umpire. So I ask, what can we say of INEC so far? Are they being a weapon for suppression, or are they a tool for the free and fair election that Nigerians have desired? I mean, you are somebody who has monitored election in several countries, and then you have monitored here in this nation. What would you say? of the role of INEC in the suppression of the people?
Well, we've said this times without number at Yaga Africa, and I'm sure a plethora of civil society organizations hold this view, that INEC is an institution that has been captured by vested political interest. And the institution is captured in such a way that it cannot perform, its functions. So when you think about suppression, the Electoral Commission is also another instrument of suppression. And how do they do this? When voters go to the polling units, they cast their vote, and results are declared that are not a reflection of the will of the people. That is suppression. And it's the most unfortunate and the most really disappointing act in the democratic process. It is a heinous crime, especially when you have returning officers who mutilate results and announce results that are falsified. That is suppression. The other form of suppression is when citizens go and register to vote, and INEC says, come and collect your PVCs. And citizens show up to collect PVCs and they don't have their PVCs because either for one issue or the other, INEC is unable to produce their PVCs. And on the day of the election, citizens cannot vote. That is a form of suppression. When political actors buy votes from citizens at the polling units, and INEC officials and security agencies, fail to prevent that from occurring, they are also contributing to suppression, because weaponization of poverty to undermine or influence political choices itself is suppression. And so what you see coming out of election is not necessarily the free choice of people. It is procured votes because people have sold their votes because of their prevailing socioeconomic condition. And whilst that is the case, it should not be encouraged for people to sell their votes, because people also contribute to the suppression of their votes, especially when they sell their votes. This is using suppression loosely. But we've also seen cases of other forms of voter suppression that are not necessarily instigated by INEC, where thugs prevent registered voters from accessing polling units to cast their vote on the day of election. Is another heinous crime in our electoral process that must be addressed. And it's just the manner that it is committed with so much impunity is one thing that undermines the capacity of states to limit these kinds of deviant political behavior on the part of our ruling political elites.
All right. And Mr. Itodo, I want you to speak to at least one major reform that can set the electoral umpire on the straight path to give Nigerians the society that they desire.
The one major reform targeted at INEC is we have to change the appointment process of commissioners in INEC. A situation where people who have political leanings are appointed into the Electoral Commission. You cannot rebuild trust and confidence in the Electoral Commission. There's a reason why politicians are appointing their cronies into the Electoral Commission. They do so to decapitate the Electoral Commission and make it impossible for INEC to deliver credible election. This is why Justice Way's committee recommended that we need to remove the power of appointing the INEC chairman, from the president, and also the power to appoint commissioners into state independent electoral commissions from the governors. When you do that, you technically insulate the electoral commission from politics. So that's one powerful reform. But the Constitution talks about non-partisanship and impeccable character or unquestionable integrity. I think that we need to review the conditions or the criteria to also include competence and skill. If you look at some of the regs, that were moved by the president and the National Assembly, as well as pressure from INEC, clearly tells you that competence is one big issue that needs to be considered when appointing people into the Electoral Commission. As we speak, there are 3 regs that were removed from office. And why? Because of corruption. And if you check how did those people get into the Electoral Commission, they were simply based on partisan appointment. So we need to change that process. I'm currently in Kenya, and as we speak today in Kenya, there's an interview for chair of the Kenyan Electoral Commission and commissioners of the Electoral Commission constituted. They will call for application, people will apply, and then they will be interviewed. It was just interesting to see people being shortlisted and applying for the job of the chair of the Electoral Commission being interviewed today. That's the kind of thing that we need to unpack, decouple, and transform this process of appointment into the Electoral Commission. That way, it will guarantee the independence of the Electoral Commission, but it's not sufficient because INEC also needs financial independence. It is sad that as we speak, up till this moment, there are certain funds, INEC's funds, that have not been released to the Electoral Commission, either from the 2023 elections or for subsequent elections that the Commission has conducted. And if you want to undermine an Electoral Commission in the field of elections, all you need to do, attack his operational independence and attack his financial independence. You make it impossible for the Commission to do what? To organize credible elections.
Well said. The youths are one of those people who are very much, suppressed in a nation like this, especially when they take to either social media or when they get to the streets for peaceful protest. Now, there's a national youth conference that is supposed to be coming very soon, if I'm not mistaken, and you're part of the committee planning this. And one of those questions will be, you are somebody who the people have continually looked at as somebody who is a standing pillar, who's pointing the direction to what is supposed to be right in society. And then the appointment is also coming, in a bit with the government. And the fear is, what are the chances that you are going to be able to speak up in this conference, knowing sure that they are the ones who are organizing it? It's not the people organizing it. What are the ways in which we can, speak up to make sure that we're not co-opted in their plans?
Well, thanks, Suresh, for actually saying that. Yes, I'm part of the planning committee for the youth conference because I believe strongly, young people need an opportunity. And as a policy advocate in the field of policy advocacy, this is an opportunity. And I urge young people to seize the opportunity, to engage in this process. And, I've made my position clear on this. And just to mention, and I also mentioned before the president, I'm not a youth in the classic definition, of young people, because a young person is between 18 and 35. I am above 35. So I am not a youth. Even though I work closely with young people, and I'm proud to continue to work with young people. But this conference, I have mentioned, and I've said it categorically clear, that when the president announced this conference, there were two issues that people highlighted. One, some thought that it was a political move. Secondly, others also thought that, this is going to be a talk shop. And I've clearly made my position known that one, if you want people to appreciate and participate in this conference, it is clear what the government needs to do is to insulate this from partisanship and from politics. Secondly, is to insulate this from bureaucratic bottlenecks. And thirdly, is to ensure, that this entire process is inclusive of all young people. And lastly, is ensuring that the actual young people are consulted in this process. I've been part of this process, and I can say that with all the preparations going on, I am bringing my experience to bear. And in the discussions, it is clear that perhaps it's going to be a very different conference. But let's note that as of today, based on the interactions and the planning, I think that this is being structured as an attempt to insulate it from partisanship and politics. And the moment that it changes, rest assured that the Nigerian people for which this conference is conveyed will be informed. So I know people have their concerns, they harbor fears because there have been previous conferences. That is right. It's legitimate for people to feel that way. But this is also an opportunity, and let's young people seize this opportunity. Some issues have been outlined. They are also going to be coming to citizens, young people, to highlight their issues. But if you think about policy advocacy, you almost come to the table, make your points clear, and ensure the policymaker does what? Understands the issues. If they don't take action, then you can draw your conclusion that in the initial stage, it wasn't meant to deliver any result. But so far, so good. We've seen commitment on the part of the federal government to ensuring that this conference speaks to the issues and creates the space for young people who are between the age category to participate in the process.
All right, thank you very much. In just 30 seconds or thereabout, tell me, how can we break down the strongholds of suppression in Nigeria? What are the key things to do?
Frederick Douglass said, the price for liberty is eternal vigilance. I think that citizens should not keep quiet. We should speak out, whether using social media, engaging our legislators to speak out against the unconstitutional actions taking place within our polity. What happened in Rivers is unacceptable. The president does not have powers to remove democratically established structures, and citizens need to call on their legislators, to impress it on the president to reverse that declaration. The NBA, other stakeholders have spoken. These are the kinds of voices that we need in the political process. Right. The second thing that we need to do is, this is a moment as a country that citizens need to do what? To organize. We need a new form of organizing that looks at different stakeholders. And I want to urge citizens not to lose steam, because democracy is a journey. That yes, government can take actions that assault our constitution. You have a power as a citizen to call them out. But lastly, one practical thing we can do, and I will still go back to the National Assembly, because when citizens voted legislators into the National Assembly, they were to represent their interests. Mm-hmm. And so this is not a time to stay away from your legislators. Keep knocking on their doors, not send them text messages. Enough is enough has the Shine Your Eye. There are phone numbers of legislators on the website. Go to www.shineyoureye.org. Those numbers, call them. They are there because of you. All right. Don't sit back and fold your hands. All right. So these are the kinds of things that we need to continue to push back on authoritarian tendencies.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Samson Itodo. It's been a very profound discussion, and I must thank you for coming on the program to share your ideas with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, that's the much we can take on this episode of The Beam. We'll be leaving you now with our top 5 videos of the week. But before that, what I thought to remind us all is that the truth does not fear any question. It does not bend for comfort or break under the weight of pressure. So let it be clear that we are here to ask all those very important questions, not to serve power, but to expose it. We don't push agendas, we only serve truth, and we make it shine. I'm Sunes Nathaniel, and until next time, keep beaming your light where it matters most. See you next time. We begin this week's countdown with a clip from Rivers State, where the sole administrator tries to assure the people that he is one of them. In fourth place, we see a clip in which IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu returns to court on charges of alleged treason, even as a new judge presides over his case. Coming third on our countdown is a video in which activist Omoyele Sowore says it's high time Nigerians woke up from their slumber. This he said with regards to the state of emergency in Rivers State.
I'm speaking on behalf of due process. I'm speaking on the side of the people of Rivers State, whose resources have been hijacked by sole administrator, by these Abuja cabals. So that's what I am. But in terms of solution, my solution is simple. The people of this country must gather their arms together, hold it tight, and liberate themselves.
Still on the politics in Rivers State, our second most viewed video for this week shows a debate on PoliticsToday regarding the legality of the state of emergency ordered by President Tinubu.
We are saying there is no law that allows a suspension of an elected officer, just like the National Assembly. The courts, not less than 10 judgments, have said you cannot suspend the legislator. Why you do that? You are denying the constituency representation.
And finally, in first place is a clip in which rights activist and lawyer Inebe Efyong addresses the case of the core member who was threatened for voicing her opinions about the country.
You cannot say that because you are serving in the NYC, you no longer have an opinion about what is affecting you as a Nigerian. She has not gone into issues relating to policies of the NYC. And she has not addressed the media. Has she spoken to the media? If she granted a press interview or spoke to the press, I would like to know if Channels TV was there. Because I have checked all the video shots in question. There is none where she spoke to the media.
That's it on our countdown today. Join us next week for more.